Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Nerdy Multiverse, and finally another full and in-depth breakdown. As today, we will be breaking down and giving our initial thoughts on episode 3 of the brand new Marvel series on Disney+. Of course, being Daredevil Born Again. Seeing the return of all of our beloved and favorite characters from the original series that was on Netflix, and now mixing it into the MCU with a brand new storyline, while still keeping the same dark tones as its predecessor. Anyways though, this episode is titled The Hollow of His Hand, and this episode begins right before Hector's trial begins, as Matt meets with him in his cell and they talk. Hector talks about his home in Puerto Rico and recalls the things that he loves from there. Specifically, the sounds of the coqui frogs, something he enjoyed listening to on a daily basis. Now, in the credits of this episode, they actually play the sounds of the coqui, which makes all of this pretty emotional. Not only because of what happens to Hector and in this episode, but because the actor himself has also passed away. This was a beautiful addition to the episode. After this, we see these smaller groups or families that worked under Kingpin and Vanessa begin to turn on each other again after months of peace. We then see more of the little BB report scenes, which are of course run by BB Urich, the niece of Ben Urich, who was of course killed by Kingpin in the Netflix series. We then cut to the one man in the entire world who eats eggs so elegantly, Kingpin himself, as him and Vanessa talk about the double homicide that occurred the night before between their own guys. Fisk tries to put that sort of quote-unquote petty violence beneath him now, but we all know that just is not the case. As the camera zooms in on his damaged knuckles, we cut directly to Matt as he cleans off his own knuckles from the fight he was forced into at the end of the previous episode. Before he can enter the courtroom, however, the very officer he fought with walks into the bathroom and confronts him. The two throw little jabs at each other and threaten one another, but it does not matter, as the court hearing will go on, and if Powell were to do anything there, he would have to explain that he was tampering with evidence. During the hearing, Matt makes one of his iconic, sassy and snarky comments towards Officer Powell, who is now standing as a witness, telling him that the cure for a black eye is having a fast fist. Officer Powell recalls what happened that night in the subway. Well, his version of what happened that night, which is of course a complete lie. So Matt begins questioning him and brings up the witness that the two officers were beating on before Hector showed up. As he does this, an officer sitting in the back of the courtroom with the Punisher logo tattooed on his neck says that the witness, Nikki Torres, cannot stand trial. And obviously, Matt is going to hear this. So this whole thing is about to get very messy and very risky. While the court hearing is happening, Cherry heads to their hideout to collect Torres. On his way there, we can see the Punisher logo graffitied on the street's walls. Cherry then escorts Nikki to the courtroom discreetly in a van. But on the way there, the van gets stopped by a few police officers, including Officer Powell. But as they open the van, nothing is inside. Cherry pulled the oldest trick in the book, bait and switch, as Nicky Torres then arrives at the courtroom and stands as a witness himself. He admits to being an informant for the police, but then he gets spooked, and then says he was never on the subway platform and was home all night long, sending Murdock's entire defense and plan right down the drain. We then cut to Buck as he meets with the heads of the 5 different crime families that work under Fisk and Vanessa. He forces them to pay up their debts to one another to stop the bloodshed within their own ranks. But shockingly, Fisk was not the one who sent Buck. It was actually Vanessa, as she admits. After hearing about this, Fisk warns Vanessa to not start doing things behind his back that will cause him to start to not trust her. All before the two have another therapy session with Heather, Matt's girlfriend. The court hearing is back on as Matt goes to his very last measure to prove Hector's innocence in the case, as he questions why he saved that man on the subway that night, and then mentions how he has done it before, where he surprises everyone in the courtroom and even the audience of the show as he pulls out the white tiger mask and reveals to everyone that Hector Ayala is the masked hero that the city all knows. And that is the real reason he was saving that man on the subway that night, because he is a hero. Now, obviously, in the previous episode, Matt got the judge to agree to not bringing up any of the white tiger stuff. And now Matt has gone against that himself. But the judge agrees to continue the hearing either way, the next day. But before that, Matt visits Hector in his cell one more time, as he tells him that after this, he likely won't be able to put on that suit anymore and be the White Tiger, because his identity is now known to everyone. But he might be surprised with how much he actually does not miss it. Matt isn't just trying to talk to Hector here, he's practically talking to himself or about himself. But Hector says that not putting that costume back on is like not breathing. That amulet chose him. And regardless of the costume, that is just who he is at heart. He is a superhero. Something the city needs. Again, this is also sending signals to Matt, as he has put the Daredevil role to the side for an entire year now. And speaking of the amulet of the White Tiger, as I mentioned in my previous video, the amulet actually does come from Kunlun. At least in the comics. And of course, Kunlun is the same location where Iron Fist got his powers. The next day, the court hearing begins once more, as both parties get in their final statements. Matt has numerous witnesses come in to explain how their lives were saved by the White Tiger, as he then pulls out police reports saying that the White Tiger also helped out officers. However, as Matt reads off different police reports mentioning the White Tiger, he announces one report that was made by an officer, Morales. Ring any bells? Well, this is very likely a hint towards Miles Morales' father, who is of course a police officer. Now you may be thinking, isn't Miles' father named Officer Davis or Jefferson Davis? Well, in recent years in the comics, Marvel has done quite a lot to change that last name, as he does now go by Jefferson Morales or Officer Morales. So this is likely yet another of many hints towards Miles Morales' existence in the MCU now. The prosecution puts together their final statement themselves, which honestly sounds like they had to scrape it all together after the whole reveal that Hector was a superhero, as he explains that good people can do bad things and vice versa, then going to the length of describing in detail what it is like being killed by a train. But none of that matters in the end, as Hector Ayala is found not guilty on all 3 charges that he was facing, leaving him free to go and giving Murdock a victory in the courtroom that started off at impossible odds. To celebrate, he cooks up some food with Heather and pulls out an old bottle of expensive bourbon that him and Foggy bought together and only drank when they won a case. He doesn't mention Foggy by name at first, but once Heather does herself, he goes a little quiet, but then recalls the memory of Foggy as they share a glass in remembrance of him and to the freedom of Hector Ayala, as they now sit in the palm of God's hollow hand, as Heather says. However, after hearing about the court case, Fisk calls in B.B. Urich again to give a statement himself, calling it an injustice and saying that juries and courts can get it wrong. He would know, recalling his very own sentencing in the original series. He then says that these vigilantes are not heroes. Well, he gives off this whole monologue, which will serve as a political agenda in the end. Hector gets suited up in the white tiger costume once more. As he goes back out into the streets, he follows the noise of some chaos that he can hear in the distance. But right as he walks out of an alleyway, a hooded figure sneaks up on him, shoots him, and kills him. Just like that. But as this figure walks off, he is revealed to be wearing a vest with the Punisher logo on it. You may be wondering, why would Frank Castle do this? Or you may already know that this was not Frank. This is likely another one of those police officers that use his symbol. This person could actually be Officer Cole North, who will be serving as a member of the Anti-Vigilante Task Force, as he was seen on set wearing a Punisher vest and the uniform for the AVTF. Having Fisk do this monologue while this happens also makes it ever so likely that he called the hit himself. Not only were the tattoos going to upset Frank, but now they are going around killing innocent people while donning his symbol. He is going to return with a vengeance. This will likely play out in a somewhat similar way that it did in the comics when he found out that cops were using his symbol. He told them that they are not like him, and if he ever sees them using his symbol again, he would come after them himself and kill them. But now, with the White Tiger dead, what comes next? Well, during all of the court scenes, Hector's niece was among the crowd, and he even mentions her, just not by name. In the comics, his niece is known as Ava Ayala, and she goes on to take on the mantle of the White Tiger herself. So, Hector may be gone, unfortunately, but the White Tiger still remains, and will be returning. It's just a matter of time now. Anyways though, as this hooded figure walks off after killing Hector in cold blood, the episode ends off. And overall, I thought that this was another amazing episode. I really liked all of the court scenes in this one. It reminded me a lot of the original series. Now, I'm sure that people will say this episode was slow or boring, but the court scenes and the amount of dialogue in this was really nice in my opinion. And I thought that it added a lot to these characters. There was a lot of meaning behind this episode as well, and it was all done so well. And a lot of it was beautiful. Hector Ayala was an incredible character and really made an impact with just a 2-episode appearance. Kamar shined as Hector and did a phenomenal job. A very likable hero and character. And Kamar brought so much heart to this series in such a small amount of time. Not only has he played a great character here, but just to mention, he also played my absolute favorite antagonist in Call of Duty, Raul Menendez. A very, very talented man. May he rest in peace. I really enjoyed this one, and I think I would give this episode another 9.5 out of 10. And I cannot wait for episode 4 next week. But yeah, that about does it for this episode. From me at least. But of course, I would like to hear your thoughts on it as well. So make sure to leave them down below. Anyways though, thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed our breakdown and review on this episode, feel free to give it a like. And with that being said, we will see you all the next time that we go through and explore the nerdy multiverse.